We are in the studio today with Alan Deaton, who you all will find online as Paul Marli. We'll get a little bit into that, but welcome to the studio, Mr. Deaton.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate it.
Yep, good to have you here. I'm going to tell you why it's so good to have you here. One of the best things about what I do is getting to see an artist grow over time. And part of what I want to talk about today is how much you have grown in what you're doing visually in an inordinately short period of time. A lot of the changes that I've seen in your artwork and the quality of the changes that I've seen in your artwork, you rarely see in a time span like has occurred since we first met.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Yeah. Let's kind of start at the beginning of your Alan Deaton.
Mm-hmm.
But when people go onto our websites, they're going to see Paul Marli is the creative entity that's doing this work. Tell me why Paul Marli.
Yes. So years ago, my wife and I, we kind of we created an LLC for like a game thing. It didn't last very long. And we had it under the name Paul Marli.
Yeah.
Like Paul Marli LLC or something. And I always liked kind of putting both our middle names together.
Yeah.
As kind of like a, how would you call it, like a pen name or something?
Yeah.
And it just felt like it seemed to, the words kind of jive together, so that's kind of stuck.
Okay.
So now it's Paul Marli Studios.
That's kind of neat. That's neat. So when we first met, I remember the day I saw your artwork for the first time. It was just as AI was kind of taking off. And you had sent in a couple of pieces, and it was this kind of cool fractal / Jorge de Coco / cubist thing that you were doing. And my first reaction when I saw it was, wow, that's a really interesting piece of AI. I haven't seen anybody control it like that. Mm-hmm. And lo and behold, it was not AI, but digital art that you had created.
Mm-hmm.
And how long have you been working as a digital artist? And then we'll go into the fact that you're painting today.
Yeah. So I've been doing digital art. So I did it out of, I guess, convenience because I still kind of don't have a studio space. Like my work office is kind of my painting space, and I just found it a lot easier. It was a lot quicker, so I have the tablet device, and it was just I could lay down or during the late hours that's kind of when I usually will do my artwork.
Yeah.
It was just a lot easier. So that's kind of when it stuck. I think it was like 2016 is when I got a tablet device, and that's when I really started dabbling in like the digital painting space. I did try to keep for those submissions, and for a few years now, I usually try to keep to like 2 traditional type brushes. I don't add digital effects or anything like that. So my thought was, hey, so if I did it original, I can kind of transfer over to a traditional, and there wouldn't be too much of a problem.
Getting a little muscle memory and stuff like that.
Get a little muscle memory, and it definitely has translated a bit. Yeah, so I try to stay away from any kind of digital effects or digital, specifically digital brushes.
Yeah. Like I say, I'm going to say you see a lot of digital paintings, and I really hadn't seen any digital paintings like some of the early pieces you did. Mm-hmm. I believe in that first batch of pieces that came through. You had a piece like He Understands, which is Christ hugging a young woman, and Homeward Bound, which is Christ with the young child. Mm-hmm. Give me a little bit of an idea of how you arrived at this idea of wanting to play with this cubist fractal thing.
So I feel like if you could take a little bit of, I don't know if this makes sense, but if you take a little bit of realism and add some abstraction to it, I feel like if you find the good recipe for it, I think abstract qualities can really portray, can teach principles, can teach you lessons that a simple, realistic photocopy or photorealistic picture can't, if that makes sense. So Jorge Coco, I kind of looked at his stuff before, and it was kind of an acquired taste for me. I think for his stuff is a little more abstract than what I try to keep a little more realism. But one thing I like that he does is his use of shape language and color. So basically his whole canvas or his whole panel size or whatever he uses is basically, in my mind, like real estate to teach a lesson, to point to something, and specific colors are there to portray like a higher theme or a higher principle that I feel like you can't. It's hard to catch in something that's just more photorealistic, but with an abstract quality, you could play around with stuff like that, and it looks good. So I really like that. So now I'm thinking all of my canvas space is good real estate to where I can maybe utilize and leverage to point to something that I otherwise maybe I wouldn't be good at.
Yep.
If that makes sense.
So. Oh yeah, no, I grew up on the East Coast. I went to a Jesuit high school, and all the buildings in there would have had some kind of artwork that when you look at Jorge's work, it kind of feels like the 60s, 70s Catholic artwork, which is kind of a derivative of the stained glass experience.
Yeah.
The fact that he's from South America and that style of artwork is so prevalent down there. It's a place where you see it all the time. So while it might be unique here, and I think that idea of saying, yeah, it's got a real connection to that stained glass thing. And yours doesn't feel like that at all. You probably easier for a stained glass person because they can put all the leading around all your hard lines and everything like that. But, again, it's that idea of abstract and, the idea that it's easier for you to conceptualize and realize in an abstract nature. Usually people have to put something together first before they take it apart. And, that there's that old saying, you got to be able to put it together before you can take it apart, technically.
Yeah.
It's out there. And so you kind of skip that. You've put it together in your mind, but you're taking it apart. And you just, like I say, it's really unique. I don't know how long you've been working on it in your own space, but to see the leap that Hand of Grace is in how you're using color and the values and everything else, still kind of broken up cubist look at the world, but it's a lot more open and it's got really cool colors, and the warmth of those colors is completely different to what you were doing before. Yeah,
it was so one reason I know when I submitted those original ones, we even talked about how I kind of have Jorge Coco vibes. And that was around the time where I saw his stuff and I was like, there's something to this. Like, there's something cool about it.
It's nothing wrong with being influenced.
Oh, yeah. No, he's one of my influences. I feel like I have a few other influences that kind of affect my work, but he was definitely one as far as the shape language type idea. But when we had talked, I know we had mentioned kind of AI, and I was like, no, I didn't, it's not AI. But... Yeah. I did think a little bit. I'm like, I don't want it to the layperson to immediately see, oh, it's kind of AI. And I liked the idea where it can kind of blend, because it is difficult to create an original piece with that crisp of different paletted colors.
Yeah,
exactly. And I really liked the idea of kind of blending them together. So it's kind of like almost the same approach. But instead of fractal, it's kind of fractal with shapes, but it's a little more blended. And maybe that would look a little more like hand done instead of, people thinking, oh, it's just kind of a generated AI thing. Because a lot of AI seems to have a lot of that palette knife kind of strokes that seems very similar. So I kind of wanted to stray a little bit. That was one reason I wanted to stray a little bit from it too.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you, I don't even think strays are right, because I don't consider a progression a stray. A stray is like, oh, I got lost, you know.
Yep.
But, you know, I'm just going to say you can do a lot of storytelling with the interesting shapes that you bring into things, which is going to jump me to Hand of Grace, which is image of Christ. Even how you take the space that you've put this image into, and Christ is coming into the piece slightly askew, so we're not necessarily on a level plane. He's reaching for a hand, obviously somebody that's needing saving. And again, these really interesting white and warm colors to the whole piece. Where did this come from? Yeah.
So that particular piece, there wasn't much to it. I wanted something to show. I wanted a picture of Christ coming down and kind of rescuing somebody, and thinking like, oh, well, how would I portray that exactly, and how would I portray the person? And I thought, well, I like the idea of a hand, just a hand coming out.
Yeah.
You won't see if it's a man or a woman. It's supposed to represent all of us. But I like how it's descriptive of when you reach your hand out to the max, then you find that anchored hand, which is, the hand of grace of Jesus Christ. We do all we can to reach up to him, and he's there. Yeah. And the darkness kind of disperses in his presence, and we have access to that. So we may not see it in our own darkness, and we may not have our head above water, so to speak, and we might still be stuck in the chaos. But as we truly reach up to our max and we do what we can, we'll find that he's there. And that's kind of, and I felt like the way it was portrayed was such where I was happy with it. That was actually kind of a prototype one of what I was going to do. But then as I came back to it, I'm like, I kind of like this one a little more. So then that one kind of stuck.
It's your first take on it is, oh, it's Jesus saving Peter, and they're walking on water, and he's pulling them out. And then the more you look at it, you're like, well, how they figured there? How's that in there? So, like I say, the idea that he's descending, that he's coming to you, like I say, it really comes across in this piece. And it was such a surprise. One of the best things in this business is when you get to see something new. Then we spent a lot of time with the piece. We're reproducing. We're doing all our marketing and everything like that. So I'm not going to say the magic goes away, but the best magic for us is when we get to look at something the first time. And that was just a ton of fun to be able to see. So then there's a piece, again, in this series of 3, and I'm just going to put them series of 3 because their colors and everything are so close to each other. Barriers No More.
Yeah.
Picture of the Tomb. So
that one, so I had 2, and we'll talk about the other one finished. But this one, especially since Easter's coming up, I wanted a picture because I feel like I want to do lands. I want to add more pieces than just 2. I've noticed like 2 individuals or an individual and kind of like this lightened background, and I'm like, I started noticing that. I'm like, I need to add some kind of, just add more stuff to it. Maybe like a landscape or multiple people, like the greater abundance. So I played with that. But I thought it's Easter coming up. I haven't done anything Easter-like, and there's a lot of pictures of, Christ coming out of a tomb. You see him happy and smiling. And those are all great. So I think, well, what can I do to, like, what kind of angle can I add to it? Yeah. So then I think, well, with the abstract nature, we can really add in some fun stuff that are symbolic. So it's this picture of this tomb, and the stone is rolled away, and there's a pillar of light coming down, and the irony of, I wanted to kind of show the irony of what the barrier that was used to seal in death. Mm-hmm. Is now unrolled, and its base is now surrounded with life. It's overcome with life. So I'm sure the tomb the stone that was rolled away wasn't just overgrown with flowers and stuff or growth, but I wanted to kind of show that again in that abstract way and kind of with the shape language showing that because of Jesus Christ and his resurrection, for us there'll be barriers no more. What once would seal us into our fates has now been fully unrolled and is actually now overcome with life. Life has overcome those barriers. So that was kind of the main theme with that one.
Now, like I say, and again, the cool thing for what you're able to do with the shapes and forms that you're putting into these things, like say, okay, this is a beam of light, and as opposed to, a painted realistic, how am I going to have this thing do it? It's got a shape and a form to it that you can really pull out and see.
Yeah.
And then kind of the third piece, I'm not going to say in this set, but again, that's just kind of how they came in.
I did think of that too when I submitted those. I'm like, that's kind of a set. So I did think of
okay,
that.
Good. Because that's, like
I'm glad it kind of came across that way.
Yeah. Is finished. Mm-hmm. And here you have Christ is outside of the tomb looking in.
Yeah. So that was another thing. And so I did Hand of Grace. I did the finished one first, and then the Barriers No More. My wife suggested, kind of again, because I hadn't done it, she's like, more of a landscapey type of picture, something that's kind of pretty and all. I'm like, okay, I'll do that. But I also wanted to do another kind of Easter one. And again, I've seen a lot of wonderful pictures of Christ coming out of a tomb smiling. And I thought, okay. And I think that's a challenge for artists sometimes to think, what's a fresh new take I can do on this? So I thought for me, I'm like, I don't know if I've seen personally any pictures kind of from the inside out, really. So I thought, well, one thing I wanted to do was like, let's capture maybe a moment in time, in my mind's head canon, I imagine Christ going out, and then kind of looking in, kind of with a little smile on his face, like realizing it's done, it's finished. And that was probably the first and last time he's ever looked inside the tomb as he's walking out into the light, and he'll never be, overcome with darkness again. And then with that one, I wanted to add some, I don't know what to call it, but teaching elements, I guess. So one thing you'll notice in the picture, there's two, so in the entrance, there's two kind of penetrations that go down, representing physical death and spiritual death. And Christ overcame both. And there's that upward trajectory that leads to his face, showing that in the end, we will be resurrected and we will see his face. And those who have his countenance engraved upon us will be able to make it back to live with our Father in heaven again. That kind of showing that through Jesus Christ, the pillar light kind of keeps going through his head to this higher plane, suggesting the flatness, suggesting like stability, calm, peace, kind of that higher level, living with God. And there's a pillar of light of that one going down, penetrating to the tomb, meaning overcoming spiritual death, where in Latter-day Saint beliefs we talk about that as overcoming spiritual death, coming back to the presence of the Father again, where we're no longer cut off. So Christ overcame both physical and spiritual death. And then the folded cloth on the table there. One of the cool things is when you're painting these things is you put a little more thought. You're like, why would he have done that there? And I always thought it was kind of cool. But I think, Jesus Christ is kind of like a calling card, because that's who is his nature, But I think there was something significant about it. Is I looked in it, and you do a little deeper dive, a little study. You look at like some Jewish traditions or whatever. Yeah. But in the end, it's like, isn't it interesting that you think he came up and he left in haste. He's like, oh, finally I'm free. But he didn't. Yeah. It was composed. There was no theft. There was no struggle. It was a composed, intentional, a departure, showing that he had authority over death. It was on his timing. There was no haste. And his like, I got to get out of here. I finally did it. He folded it, And there was a dignity, there's a calm with it as he finally left the tomb, and he's like, it's finished. And to me, I thought that's kind of a cool little detail that I think, you see all that in scriptures in the Bible that we kind of we can easily miss sometimes. So it's fun to kind of put a magnifying glass on those small details.
So when you say you research, I'm interested, where did you find that the tomb was neat?
So the New Testament, I forget where it's at, talked about the folded cloth when
The
they saw
folded cloth,
the folded
okay.
cloth.
Yeah.
The headpiece, not the. From my understanding, I think it wasn't like he was wrapped up, the bandages, but then they had like the folded cloth that they put over the face, and
Okay.
that was neatly folded or something on it. So that's.
Yeah.
So if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, like I say, it's just, I think a lot of people, they expect an oil painter to be planning things out. And it's really neat to hear with your digital work the degree to which you're planning out what you're doing as well. I'm not surprised, but I just think it's good for people to hear that, because I just think there is this idea that digital's just kind of happens. And the fact that you have a very methodical way of approaching what you're doing, you have a very succinct story that you're seeking to reveal or share, and you have developed a style that helps to tell the story the way that you want to do it. Like I say, it just says, I've known it all along, but digital artwork that is generated digitally, especially when you're using paints and brushes and everything along the way that you were just speaking about, it's the same thing. It's not. You can play with programs, but you can also be creating from scratch in that space. Period.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you paint as well, and you just brought in a couple of paintings for a Mother's Day show that we're having.
Yeah.
One's called Divinely Appointed, a young woman and a child. Tell me about that.
So it's this young woman a mother holding a child, and there are some shape language stuff with that. So it might be kind of hard to tell because it kind of seems to blend into one shape, but it initially starts with a pillar of light coming down, showing her connection with God, that He's there, the divine help that you get as a mother. And then there's a kind of a circle around her that's suggesting and symbolic of the holiness and covenants that you make that help make you holy. And as you stick to your covenants and you keep the commandments and do your best, there's a cone around her underneath suggesting that divine protection as you do that. And you'll notice, if you look at the piece, the ground is kind of all angled and kind of chaotic and scrambled, but directly underneath her is a straight, stable ground.
Yeah.
Kind of suggesting that as you have that connection with God and you're doing your best, you're keeping your covenants, you will be on stable ground as a mother. And then the pillar of light, as it keeps going, it kind of turns into a cross that kind of is that the mother is right in the middle, representing the sacrifice of the atoning sacrifice of Jesus Christ. Because I've met a lot of mothers who, and I think it would be safe to say, from my experience in general, I think a lot of mothers, especially nowadays, they don't feel like they measure up very, very much as a mother. They always, it seems like a lot of times they'll look down on themselves and think that they're no good, they're not good enough, or that they're not delivering as they should. But the purpose of the cross is to show that despite what flaws you think you have or you actually have, Jesus Christ fills in the gaps. That the atonement of Jesus Christ truly makes up the difference for what you feel you lack, that your role as a mother is truly divinely appointed, and you are built to succeed. You have the atonement of Jesus Christ, you have your covenants, you have that direct connection with God, and He has placed you where you can be on stable ground if you stick to those things, regardless of the chaos around you. And you'll notice in the picture that if you stick to those things, the darkness cannot touch or penetrate you, and that you'll notice that the darkness is surrounding them, but doesn't actually end up penetrating, especially the child. And I think I have met a lot of women who they struggle with that, and I think to myself, you're doing way better than what you think you're doing. But me's telling them that wouldn't mean much, and they're way beyond me, as far as their capabilities, and it's almost like if you just saw how awesome you are, and things don't always work out the way you think, and you don't get the output that you want maybe for a child or what you're doing, but what you're doing truly is a divinely appointed role, and I think is amazing. And I feel like you don't see that in the world today, a lot of encouragement of mothers showing that, hey, you're actually doing a lot better than what you think you're doing.
Yeah, and that focus on the idea of motherhood. I know just as many insecure guys that are running around saying, I don't know how good a job I'm doing at being a father. So I think we have all that. There's you see a lot of work that the young women are doing today that I think is really speaking directly at this subject, whether it be a Jenny Page or a Lavetta Reyes Cairo. I look and I see the woman that they portray is a strong woman, is divinely sent on a path and purpose that they're working through, whether it be in a depiction of Eve or in the case of Jenny Page, some woman who's working out in a gym, just strength, strong women. Women are strong. And like I say, and this message is not coming from just one spot. And it's not Me Too. It's not a 1970s women's liberation thing. It's a story of strength, and it's a story of purpose. And like I say, I really see it a lot in what a lot of the young women are doing out here creatively. So it's interesting to see you coming in and doing the same thing.
I think a lot of people, I think just in general, a lot of people get caught up in the bells and whistles. Like at the job, it's like, we may not have the latest and greatest arcade games or roller coasters, but at the end of the day, people don't buy products, they buy an experience. And I feel like with art, you don't buy it for art's sake, you buy it for an experience. What do you want? You want something that's meaningful and resonates, or you want something that makes the house feel warm. It's all an experience you're buying. And
we're in the entertainment business.
Yeah. I mean, that's what it is. So I feel like for me, I'm trying my best to switch my brain, because I'm very techie brain sometimes, and I do software right now professionally, and but I think I approach my art very technically, but I have to remember, it's like, okay, at the end of all this technical mumbo jumbo, bells and whistles, whatever, what do I want them to experience? What do I want them to know, feel, and do? Is there an invitation at the end, like, hey, this makes me want to be better? Like that's kind of, I try to start with the end in mind, and then once I have that end, it's like, okay, what shapes can I use? How can I portray it? Can there be a cool, maybe allegorical way I can do this, as opposed to always having Jesus doing something? Maybe can I have kind of more of an allegorical way where it's still kind of a cool landscape, or like a guy, a farmer in a field, and that's cool. But then when you look at it, there's a little deeper meaning, just things that add value. It's just value adding to add up to the experience. And that's kind of one thing I'm trying with all the pieces, to try to add kind of a little, because I like poetry stuff too. So trying to add a poem with each one, something that may help explain it in a way where it makes people think about it a little more.
So I'm going to have you read one of your poems right now.
Okay. We'll do Hand of Grace.
Okay.
It's a little shorter, but it says, "The darkness bows thee, wretched man. Thy struggles cloud the light thou seeks. With arm raised up for some reprieve, an anchored hand thy hand doth meet. Not earned by deed, nor claimed by right, nor earned by station or thy place, But lo, his hand outstretched for thee, the mighty Christ, his hand of grace.
It's the full package. And I think it's really cool that you're like, oh, I'm a software engineer, But I'll argue that software engineering is art.
Yeah, it is. It is.
It really is. Because anybody can do something by the numbers, but to be generating from scratch is no different than coming in and saying, hey, I'm going to take this physical space and I'm going to make something of it as well. And then you make it three-dimensional by throwing in other elements. I'm going to tell you, it's what a treat. And I want to make sure that, I think, again, I have not seen a progression of somebody with their artwork in such a short window of time to hop from one thing to another, and such a visual growth that definitely is linear. You can see that this came from one place and now you've ended up at the next. And I think it's going to be really cool to see where you go next, or even if you live in this little space for a while. I think there's a lot of exploration to be done in it, but it's really beautiful. It's really pleasant. And for everything we said, it's kind of a cool experience. The idea of shape language, which is my big walk-away learning thing today. I love that whole phrase that you put together, and I can't wait to have you back again.
Oh, I appreciate it, Scott. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, this has been Haven Light Artist Spotlight. I'm Scott Usher, and thanks for joining us in the studio today with Alan Deaton, a.k.a. Paul Marli.